In the scorching desert heat, a police officer was already dying, and no one knew where he was. 18 hours had passed since Officer Daniel Cruz's final transmission. Doctors say most don't survive that long in this heat. No one knew if he was still alive. Search teams swept mile after mile. Drones scanned empty roads. Helicopters circled the cracked earth. Every minute pushed them closer to tragedy. Then suddenly 2 police dogs, Rex and Hunter, stopped dead in their tracks. Their ears shot up. Their noses twitched. Their bodies stiffened. "Do you smell something?" an officer whispered. But the dogs didn't bark, didn't look back. They bolted, like they'd found something they weren't trained to ignore. Dust exploded beneath their paws as they sprinted across the desert, handlers stumbling behind, shouting their names, until the dogs erupted into frantic, desperate barks. Just beyond a cactus lay a sight no one was emotionally prepared for. A police officer, bloodied, bruised, tied so brutally that his hands had turned purple, struggled to breathe under the blistering sun. His badge glinted weakly. His cracked lips trembled. "Rex. Hunter, you found me," he whispered. But how did he end up here? Who did this to him? And what the dogs did next broke every rule they were trained to follow. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The desert was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind felt hesitant as it dragged long trails of dust across the dry, cracked earth. Officer Blake Foster walked beside his 2 K9 partners, Rex and Hunter, expecting nothing unusual from their afternoon training routine. The sun hung mercilessly overhead, turning the air into shimmering waves that made every distant shape blur. Blake wiped the sweat from his brow, scanning the horizon out of habit. Nothing but sand, emptiness, and silence. Rex sniffed the air sharply. His ears twitched. Hunter froze beside him, tail stiffening, nose lifted toward the wind. Blake immediately felt his chest tighten. He knew this behavior. This wasn't curiosity. It was alarm. "Rex? Hunter? What is it, boys?" he called out. But neither dog listened. In perfect synchronization, both German shepherds suddenly lunged forward, tearing across the desert with desperate urgency. Their paws pounded the ground so hard dust exploded behind them. "Hey, stop. Rex, Hunter, stop." Blake yelled, breaking into a run. But the dogs didn't even look back. Blake's pulse spiked. These dogs were trained, highly trained. They only ignored commands when something was dangerously wrong. He sprinted after them, stumbling over uneven ground, his boots kicking up dirt. The heat scorched his lungs, but he kept running, eyes locked on the 2 shadows racing ahead of him. Rex barked, a sharp, frantic sound that echoed across the barren land. Hunter followed with a low, trembling growl. Blake's stomach dropped. Something was out there. As he drew closer, he noticed the dogs slowing down, circling a strange shape near a tall cactus. At first, Blake thought it was debris, maybe abandoned equipment or a stray tarp blown by the wind. But as the haze cleared, he felt his entire body jolt. A man. No, an officer. Tied to a cactus. Motionless. Covered in dust, sweat, and blood. Blake's breath caught. He stumbled to a halt, eyes widening in disbelief. "Dear God." Rex whimpered and nudged the man's leg gently. Hunter pressed his head against the officer's shoulder, refusing to move away. Blake fell to his knees beside the unconscious figure. The uniform was torn, badge barely visible beneath the dirt. The man's wrists were bound so tightly the rope had carved deep red lines into his skin. His face was bruised, lips cracked, breath shallow, almost non-existent. "Cole," Blake whispered, recognizing him. Deputy Cole Harrison, missing for 24 hours. Blake's hands shook as he reached for his radio. The dogs had found him, and the sight was worse than anyone imagined. Blake pressed 2 fingers against Cole's neck, praying for a pulse. For a terrifying second, he felt nothing, only burning skin and dust. Then, faintly, the smallest flutter. Weak, fragile, barely there. But it was enough. "He's alive," Blake whispered, a rush of shaky relief breaking through him. Rex barked sharply, pacing in small frantic circles. Hunter stood guard, his body positioned between Cole and the open desert as if expecting danger to return at any moment. Their protective instincts were undeniable. Something terrible had happened here, and they knew it long before any human arrived. Blake grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Foster. I've located Deputy Harrison. He's in critical condition. Send EMS and backup immediately. Coordinates coming now." His voice trembled despite his effort to stay composed. He rattled off the location, then dropped back beside Cole, trying to assess the damage. Cole's forehead was split open, dried blood streaking across his cheek. His uniform was stiff with sweat and sand. Rope burns wrapped around his wrists and torso like dark bruise scars. Whoever tied him here wanted him to suffer long before anyone found him. Rex let out a low growl, sniffing the air again. Blake looked around quickly. "Easy, boy. What do you smell?" Hunter stepped closer to Cole and nudged his boot, as if urging him to wake up. The dogs couldn't understand why their fellow officer wasn't responding, and their anxious energy made Blake's heartbeat throb in his ears. Cole's eyelids twitched. Blake leaned closer. "Cole? It's Blake. You're safe now. We found you." Cole's cracked lips parted, but no sound came out. Only a faint gasp, dry, pained, desperate. Blake quickly reached for his water bottle, but stopped. Cole's condition was too unstable. Giving him water could be dangerous. He instead lifted Cole's head gently, giving him a shred of relief from the unrelenting heat. Rex whined, a long, trembling sound that echoed across the empty desert. "You guys saved him," Blake murmured, glancing at the dogs. "If you hadn't run off when you did—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. Minutes felt like hours as dust swirled around them, the sun burning hotter, Cole breathing weaker. Blake kept checking the horizon, begging to see sirens, vehicles, anything. The desert offered nothing but heat waves. Finally, distant engines growled. Backup was coming. Blake placed a steady hand on Rex and Hunter. "Stay close. We're not out of danger yet." Because one thing was certain. Someone left Cole here to die, and they weren't finished. By the time the backup vehicles screeched to a halt, a cloud of dust rolled over the scene, swallowing the officers in a haze of heat and panic. Paramedics rushed forward, dropping equipment beside Cole as Rex and Hunter stepped aside but refused to move far. Their bodies remained tense, ears pinned forward, tracking every sound. "Pulse is weak," one medic muttered. "Dehydration severe," another added. "Get fluids ready." Blake knelt at Cole's side, noticing the subtle flicker in the deputy's eyelids. "Cole? Can you hear me?" he whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then Cole's fingers twitched, curling slightly as if fighting to return from somewhere dark and heavy. His lips trembled, breath rattling unevenly. He looked like a man clinging to the last threads of consciousness. One medic leaned closer. "Sir, stay with us. You're safe now." Cole's cracked eyes opened barely. They weren't fully focused, but they locked on Blake with desperate recognition. Blake, the whisper was dry, almost soundless. Blake leaned in. "I'm here. Take it slow." Cole swallowed painfully, every movement looking like it scraped fire across his throat. He tried speaking again, but the words broke apart before leaving his lips. Tears of frustration gathered in his eyes. "It's okay," Blake assured him softly. "You're okay. Just breathe." But Cole wasn't trying to calm down. He was trying to warn them. He lifted one trembling hand, pointing toward the horizon with a shaking finger. His voice cracked like brittle glass. "AMB ambush." Blake's breath caught. "An ambush? Cole, who did this to you?" Cole coughed, the sound weak and dry. His entire body shuddered from the effort. Rex stepped closer, nudging Cole's shoulder with his nose, sensing the urgency. Hunter stood behind Blake, growling low, scanning the empty desert. Cole forced out another broken whisper. "Not random, they knew where I'd be." Blake exchanged a tense look with the sergeant standing nearby. This wasn't an accident. Someone intentionally targeted Cole. Cole's eyes widened, fear flashing through them. He gripped Blake's sleeve with surprising strength for a dying man. "They're coming back," he rasped. A chill ran across Blake's spine despite the scorching heat. "Who's coming back, Cole? Tell me." Cole shook his head, breath hitching. The effort to speak was tearing him apart. With one final push of will, he whispered, "Don't let them finish." His voice vanished. His hand slipped from Blake's arm. His eyes rolled shut again. Rex barked sharply. Once, twice, an urgent warning. Hunter growled at the open desert for rising. Cole's message was clear. Whoever attacked him wasn't done, and they might already be closer than anyone realized. The paramedics worked urgently over Cole, but Blake's focus shifted to the dogs. Rex stood rigid, nose pressed against the ground, sniffing with sharp, rapid breaths. Hunter moved several feet away, circling a patch of disturbed sand. Their behavior wasn't random. They were tracking something. Blake rose to his feet. "What do you boys smell?" Rex suddenly barked, a loud, commanding sound that made every nearby officer turn. Hunter pawed the earth, uncovering a faint trail leading away from the cactus. Blake stepped beside them, squinting at the ground. There, barely visible under the desert dust, was a deep boot print. Then, another. And another. A trail. His stomach tightened. "Sergeant, over here." Blake called out. The sergeant jogged over, his expression shifting the moment he saw the prints. "These are fresh." "Exactly," Blake said. Whoever tied Cole up walked away on foot. Rex growled low, following the trail with intense focus. Hunter joined him, their movements synchronized as they pushed forward. Blake felt unease crawl up his spine. These dogs were trained to detect threats, and everything about their posture screamed danger. The sergeant crouched down, studying the impressions. "Looks like two different sets of prints. Larger boots and smaller ones." Blake frowned, meaning at least two people were involved. The thought made his pulse spike. Cole hadn't been caught off guard by one attacker. He'd been ambushed by a team. Hunter suddenly barked toward the horizon, his body lowering as if preparing to spring. The desert stretched empty and silent, but Blake knew better. Someone had been here recently. Someone who had no problem leaving a police officer to die. Blake grabbed his radio. "All units, possible suspects traveled west on foot. Be alert. Repeat, be alert." But even as he gave the order, he felt Cole's warning echo inside him. "They're coming back." Rex's ears perked sharply. He jerked his head toward the same direction Cole had pointed earlier. Blake followed the line of sight, but all he saw was shimmering heat and shifting dunes. Nothing visible, nothing obvious. But the dogs weren't wrong. The desert held secrets, footprints, broken sand, disturbed earth. Signs of recent movement. Signs of people who worked fast, hid well, and were confident no one would find Cole in time. Blake swallowed hard. If the attackers realized Cole survived, they might return to finish the job. He knelt beside Rex and Hunter, placing a steady hand on each of their shoulders. "Find them," he whispered. The dogs didn't hesitate. They took off, leading the way into the unknown. Rex sprinted ahead, nose to the ground, weaving through scattered rocks and patches of brittle grass. Hunter followed closely, his body low, muscles tense, every step deliberate. Blake and two other officers struggled to keep up, the desert heat slamming into them with every breath. But the dogs moved with purpose, driven, focused, certain. They weren't just following a scent. They were following evidence. Suddenly, Rex skidded to a halt, claws digging into the sand. He barked sharply, digging furiously at a shallow mound of loose earth. Hunter joined him immediately, scraping with both paws, sending dirt flying in bursts. Blake hurried forward. "What is it? What did you find?" The dogs continued digging until something metallic peeked through the sand, glinting faintly under the sun. Blake knelt quickly, brushing away debris with shaky hands. His breath caught the moment he realized what he was touching. A radio. Cole's police-issued radio. Smashed. Deliberately smashed. The screen was shattered, the antenna bent almost in half. Worse, the casing showed signs of impact, blunt force hits, repeated blows, as if someone wanted to guarantee it could never transmit a signal. Blake's stomach twisted. This confirmed everything Cole had tried to warn them about. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't an accident. This was a planned attack. "Sergeant!" Blake shouted. They destroyed his radio. They didn't want him calling for help. The sergeant's jaw clenched as he examined the device. This wasn't dropped. These are intentional strikes. Rex barked again, pawing at the dirt beneath the radio. Blake dug a little deeper and uncovered tire fragments, small rubber shreds, likely from someone peeling out in a hurry. He also spotted faint indentations, tire tracks partially erased by shifting sand. Hunter growled, lifting his head toward the distance. His ears twitched, picking up something no human could detect. Blake followed his gaze. "What is it, boy?" Rex joined Hunter, both dogs standing perfectly still, listening. The silence between their breaths felt heavy, like the desert itself was holding something dangerous. Blake exhaled slowly. They left in a vehicle, but came on foot to grab Cole. The sergeant nodded grimly, meaning the vehicle could still be close. Rex barked once, loud, urgent. Hunter took a step forward, sniffing the air, then jerked his head west. Blake felt adrenaline surge. The smashed radio, the tire fragments, the sudden alertness in both dogs. Everything pointed to one truth. They had just crossed into the attacker's trail, and the trail was still warm. Rex and Hunter charged ahead, weaving between jagged rocks as the officers followed close behind. The trail grew sharper, more defined. Scattered pieces of disturbed sand formed a pattern only the dogs could fully understand. Blake trusted their instincts. These two had already saved one life today, and they weren't finished. The desert stretched endlessly, a harsh world of heat and silence. But something about the atmosphere felt disrupted, wrong, almost vibrating with leftover energy from whatever had happened here. The dogs' pace quickened as they pulled the team toward a rise in the terrain. Then Rex stopped. Not suddenly, but slowly, like something heavy had reached into his chest and frozen him. His ears lowered, nose twitching, tail stiff. Hunter approached the edge of the small ridge, sniffing the ground intensely before letting out a low, uneasy groan. Blake climbed the ridge, his boots slipping on loose gravel. When he reached the top, his breath hitched. Below, the ground was charred black. A wide circular scorch mark spread across the desert floor, surrounded by shattered glass, twisted metal fragments, and the unmistakable smell of burnt fuel. A small explosion site, recent. Very recent. "What happened here?" one officer whispered. Blake knelt, picking up a blackened piece of glass. It crumbled slightly in his hand. Not old, not weathered. This had happened today. The sergeant scanned the area, jaw tightening. "This looks like a detonated vehicle." Blake nodded. Cole mentioned an ambush. Hunter began circling the edges of the burn mark, nose pressed to the ground. Rex sniffed the air, stepping carefully around the debris. Suddenly he barked twice, short, sharp bursts that signaled recognition. Blake hurried over. "You smell someone?" Rex sniffed again, then paced toward the outer rim of the blast pattern. Hunter joined him, guiding Blake to a small patch of sand some distance away. Kneeling down, Blake brushed aside the top layer of dust. Footprints. But not just any footprints. They overlapped, frantic, like people running in panic after the explosion. Bootprints. Heavy ones. Deep. Rushed. Blake's chest tightened as the pieces began connecting. Cole had been lured. Cole had been outnumbered. Cole had walked right into this explosion site. This wasn't random at all. This was part of the ambush, Blake said quietly. Cole got here first, and they were waiting. The sergeant exhaled slowly. If this is the vehicle Cole was tracking, they blew it up to destroy evidence. Rex let out a soft whine, then nudged Blake's leg urgently. Hunter growled toward the west, eyes locked on a barely visible streak of displaced sand. A drag mark. Something heavy had been pulled. Or someone. Blake's pulse raced. They moved someone after the explosion. The sergeant stepped closer. "Cole." "Maybe," Blake said. "Or someone else." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of oil and gunpowder. Whatever happened here wasn't over, and the dogs were leading them straight into the heart of it. Rex lowered his nose to the ground again, inhaling sharply as the wind shifted. Hunter mirrored him. Their bodies tense, tails rigid, ears pinned forward. Whatever scent they had picked up beyond the explosion site, it wasn't fading. It was getting stronger. Blake tightened his grip on their leashes. Easy, show me where. He didn't need to say it twice. The dogs lunged forward with fierce determination, dragging him and 2 other officers across the sandy ridge. Their strides lengthened, their breathing deepened. They weren't just tracking now, they were chasing. The desert floor became uneven, scattered with rocks that forced the officers to step carefully. But Rex and Hunter barreled forward, slipping between narrow gaps and weaving around boulders like they knew this land better than the men behind them. "Slow down," one officer shouted. But Blake shook his head. "No, let them run. They've got something." Hunter suddenly veered left, nose pressed into a smear of darker sand. Disturbed, dragged, rough. Blake knelt, running his fingers across it. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone had been pulled through the dirt. "Another victim?" one officer whispered. "Or a suspect who couldn't walk," Blake muttered. Before he could finish, Rex barked sharply and sprinted ahead, tugging Blake so hard he nearly stumbled. Hunter followed, growling low as if warning the ground itself to reveal its secrets. The sun dipped slightly, casting longer shadows across the terrain. The heat still burned, but a faint breeze carried a new smell, sweat, metal, and something bitter Blake couldn't identify. It made Rex sneeze, then growl. "What is that?" Blake murmured. "Motor oil," the sergeant answered behind him. "Strong. Someone handled machinery recently." Rex tugged harder. Hunter's growl deepened. Footprints emerged again, clearer this time, cutting through the sand with frantic urgency. 2 sets. Heavy strides. One dragging something. One pulling. They were moving fast, Blake said. Running from the blast. The sergeant nodded grimly. Or running toward their next target. Rex suddenly stopped. Not hesitantly, instantly. His muscles locked. His ears twitched. His eyes narrowed toward a scattered cluster of rocks ahead. Hunter stiffened beside him, letting out a quiet, vibrating growl. Blake froze. "You see something?" Rex didn't move. Hunter didn't blink. The desert around them fell silent. Too silent. Blake's heartbeat thudded in his ears as he stepped forward cautiously. Something or someone was close. And the dogs had just found the next piece of the ambush. Rex stood frozen, every muscle in his body coiled tight like a spring. Hunter remained beside him for a moment, until a sudden gust of wind rolled across the desert and carried with it 2 different scents. The shift hit the dogs instantly. Their heads snapped in opposite directions. Blake saw it happen. He felt it happen. "Wait, boys, hold on," he said, stepping forward. But the tension in Rex and Hunter's bodies told a different story. There wasn't one trail anymore. There were 2. Rex growled, lowering his head toward the rocky terrain ahead. Hunter's ears twitched toward the opposite direction, a cluster of abandoned shacks barely visible against the horizon. Both dogs vibrated with urgency. Then, in perfect unplanned synchronicity, they split. Rex bolted toward the rocks. Hunter sprinted toward the shacks. "Rex." "Hunter, stop." Blake lunged forward, but the leashes slipped from his grasp. Dust exploded beneath the dog's paws as they tore across the desert in opposite directions, each following a different threat. The officers tensed, weapons ready. "Which one do we follow?" one asked. Blake's heart pounded. The dogs never split unless the situation was extremely serious, unless there were multiple scents strong enough to indicate multiple suspects or multiple victims. He made a decision instantly. 2 teams, he ordered. "I'll take Rex's trail. Sergeant, you take Hunter's." The sergeant nodded sharply. "Move." Blake sprinted after Rex, who was already weaving between tall boulders that cast jagged shadows across the sand. Rex's growls echoed through the narrow rock passages, guiding Blake like a compass. The air grew cooler here, the wind trapped between stone walls. Something about it felt claustrophobic, dangerous. Rex skidded to a halt beside a sharp drop-off and barked furiously at the ground. Blake followed his gaze. Drag marks. Fresh. Deep. Slightly bloody. Someone had been pulled through here. Hard. Meanwhile, in the distance, Hunter charged toward the abandoned shacks, the sergeant and 2 officers trailing close behind. As Hunter approached the buildings, he slowed, creeping low, tail stiff. The wooden structures creaked under the desert wind, their old boards rattling like bones. Hunter stopped at the door of the largest shack and growled, a deep, throaty sound that reverberated in the officers' chests. Something, or someone, was inside. Back at the rocks, Blake scanned the ridge, his breath uneven. Rex's growling intensified. Blake raised his weapon slowly, eyes narrowing. 2 trails, 2 directions, 2 threats. And whatever waited at the end of each path was connected to the ambush that nearly killed Cole. Blake whispered under his breath, "Good work. Boys, don't let anything surprise us now." But something already was. They had just discovered proof the ambush wasn't over, and neither suspect was far. Hunter crept toward the shack with slow, deliberate steps, every movement controlled. His muscles stayed rigid, ears pinned forward, nose twitching as he picked up faint traces of sweat, metal, and something else, fear. The sergeant motioned for the officers to spread out, weapons raised, forming a tight perimeter around the old wooden structure. The shack groaned under the weight of the shifting wind, its door hanging half off its hinges. Sunlight trickled through cracks in the boards, slicing thin lines across the dusty floor. Hunter growled softly, nudging the door with the tip of his nose. The sergeant whispered, "Easy, go ahead, boy." Hunter pushed the door open. The officers stormed in behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. The inside was small, dark, suffocating. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, long dead. Dust coated every surface. But the room wasn't empty, not by a long shot. "Sergeant, look at this." Pinned against the far wall were dozens of photographs. Some were printed, others torn from surveillance reports. Every single one showed Cole Harrison, walking to his car, entering the station, patrolling at night, visiting the explosion site that morning. Someone had been tracking him for weeks. Hunter barked once, circling a table cluttered with burner phones, maps marked in red ink, empty ammo casings, and a notebook covered in symbols. The sergeant picked up one of the phones and examined the call history. "All outgoing calls were wiped," he muttered. "Whoever was here left in a hurry." Hunter suddenly stiffened near a wooden shelf, his nose pressed tightly against a dusty floorboard. Then he pawed, once, twice, harder each time. The sergeant knelt beside him. "What do you smell, boy?" Hunter growled and kept scratching. "There's something under here." The sergeant signaled 2 officers. Pried open. They wedged their crowbars into the seam. The floorboard groaned, splintered, then popped loose, revealing a dark cavity beneath the shack. A trapdoor. One officer shined his flashlight inside. "Sir, you need to see this." The sergeant leaned over the opening and felt his stomach drop. Below, tied to a chair, bloodied and barely conscious, was a man who wasn't Cole. His face was bruised, lips split, shirt torn. He lifted his head weakly, eyes unfocused but desperate. "He's alive," the sergeant said. "Get medics, now." Hunter barked sharply, as if urging them to hurry. The man struggled to speak, voice cracking. They weren't after just Cole. He swallowed painfully. "They're coming back. All of them." The shack held secrets, but the biggest one was still unfolding. The man tied beneath the shack fought to lift his head as officers rushed down the narrow ladder. His breaths came in shallow, painful bursts, each inhale dragging through his chest like broken glass. Hunter stood at the edge of the opening, whining urgently, pacing back and forth as if trying to pull the medics down faster. The sergeant knelt beside the injured man. "Sir, you're safe now. We're going to get you out." The man flinched at the touch, his muscles trembling with fear rather than pain. No, you don't understand." His voice cracked, barely a whisper. "They're still here. They're watching." Blake's voice came through the radio from the ridge. "Sergeant, do you copy? Rex just found more drag marks, fresh." The sergeant's eyes widened. "Copy that. We've found another victim. Alive." The man shook his head weakly, eyes darting around the small underground chamber. "They weren't after him, not at first." "Who?" the sergeant asked. The man swallowed hard. "Cole. They used me to lure him. His breath hitched as he tried to continue. I was an informant. I told Cole about a planned hit. A cartel cell moving through the desert. I tried to warn him. The officers exchanged grim looks. I was supposed to meet him, the man continued. But they got to me first. They forced me to call him. Told me what to say. Tears streamed down his dirt-stained face. I didn't want to, but they would have killed me. The sergeant's jaw tightened. So Cole walked straight into an ambush. The man nodded painfully. They used explosives, blocked his escape. Then they tied him up to finish him later. Hunter growled softly, as if recognizing the cruelty described. The sergeant leaned closer. You said they're coming back. Why? The man's voice shook, terror rising in every syllable. Because Cole wasn't the only target. They want to eliminate anyone who knows about their route. Anyone who interferes. His eyes met the sergeant's with chilling clarity. That includes all of you. A cold silence settled in the cramped space. The weight of his words pressed against every wall. The sergeant grabbed his radio. All units be advised. This operation is cartel coordinated. Suspects are armed, organized, and returning to the scene. Above ground, Hunter snarled, facing the desert as if he could already feel danger approaching. We need to move him now, one medic urged. As they lifted the injured informant from the hole, he whispered one more sentence. So quiet the sergeant almost didn't catch it. They never leave loose ends. The desert wind howled as if confirming the truth. This wasn't a rescue anymore. It was a race against time. Rex bounded across the ridge with a renewed urgency, pulling Blake through narrow gaps between jutting rocks. The dog's growls vibrated against the stone walls, echoing like distant thunder. Blake could feel it. Rex wasn't just following a scent now. He was responding to pain. Human pain. Easy boy, Blake whispered, though his own breath was shaky. I'm right behind you. Rex skidded across a patch of loose gravel, then stopped so abruptly that Blake nearly collided with him. The German shepherd's body lowered, ears pinned, nose trembling. He let out a low whine and stepped toward a cluster of rocks partially collapsed into each other, forming a shadowed hollow. Blake scanned the area. You got something? Rex barked sharply once. Blake crouched, lifting a broken slab of stone. Dust exploded outward, and beneath the rubble, a human hand appeared, bruised, trembling, desperately clawing for air. Officer down, Blake shouted, ripping away stones with frantic strength. The other officers rushed over, joining the effort. As the debris cleared, a battered officer came into view, half buried but alive. His face was swollen, dried blood crusted along his jaw, uniform torn nearly to shreds. His breaths came in agonizing rasps. Oh my God, Blake murmured. Hang on, we've got you. The injured man coughed hard, struggling to speak. They thought I was dead, he choked. Drag me here. Left me. Rex pressed his nose gently against the man's shoulder, whimpering softly, as if reassuring him he wasn't alone anymore. Blake leaned closer. Did you see how many? Who did this? The officer blinked painfully, his eyes darting with fear. Too many, he rasped. I heard voices, footsteps. They're regrouping. Blake felt cold dread spread through his chest. They're coming back tonight to finish what they started, the officer whispered. Blake exchanged a tense look with the sergeant who had just arrived from the shack. Both men knew the implications. If the cartel group returned in full force, their small search team would be dangerously outnumbered. Rex suddenly stiffened, lifting his head toward the open desert. Hunter, far in the distance near the shack, growled at the same moment, different places, same reaction. A warning. Blake swallowed hard. They're close, aren't they? The injured officer nodded weakly. They never leave survivors. Not today, Blake said firmly. We're not losing anyone else. The medics hurried in, lifting the second victim onto a stretcher. Rex paced beside them, growling into the wind. The desert air shifted again. Danger was returning. And this time, everyone felt it. The sun dipped behind the western ridge, dragging long shadows across the desert floor. The heat faded, but the air grew heavier, thicker, almost humming with an invisible threat. Rex sensed it first. His ears shot up. His tail stiffened. A deep growl rumbled in his chest. Hunter, still near the shack, reacted the same way. He planted his paws firmly, eyes locked on the horizon. Blake froze. "Everybody get into position," he whispered. "They're here." The sergeant raised his hand, signaling silence. Officers crouched behind rocks, weapons drawn, breaths held. The wounded men had been moved to a safe zone behind a ridge, guarded by 2 medics and a patrol unit. But even from there, the tension was unmistakable. Then the sound came. Engines. Multiple engines. The low, rumbling growl of off-road vehicles climbing steadily across the desert. Rex barked once, sharp, urgent. Hunter followed with a low, threatening snarl. Headlights finally broke through the darkness. 3, no, for vehicles bouncing across the uneven ground, heading straight toward them. Dust clouds billowed behind the tires, glowing faintly in the dusk. "Positions," the sergeant ordered. The vehicles skidded to a stop in a rough semicircle. Armed men jumped out, fast, coordinated, moving with deadly confidence. Their faces were covered, weapons slung over their shoulders, boots crunching loudly on gravel. One of them pointed toward the shack. "They're looking for him," Blake whispered. "For both victims." The cartel soldiers fanned out without hesitation, sweeping the area with flashlights. 2 of them moved toward the ridge where the officers hid. Rex growled louder. Blake whispered urgently, "Easy wait." But they didn't have to wait long. One attacker spotted the broken floorboard inside the shack. He shouted something in Spanish, signaling the others. More guns raised. More footsteps charged forward. The sergeant made the call. "Engage." Gunfire erupted across the desert, echoing between the rocks. Sparks burst from ricochets, dust exploding into the air with every shot. Officers returned fire, taking cover behind boulders. Rex lunged forward with Blake, weaving through the chaos with precise, trained aggression. Hunter darted between the shack and the ridge, flanking the attackers from the opposite side. One gunman tried to rush the shack, but Hunter cut him off, snarling viciously, forcing the man to stumble backward into the line of officers. Another gunman climbed the rocks toward the victims, but Rex sprinted up the slope, teeth bared, knocking the weapon from the attacker's hands. The ambush had returned, but this time Cole's team and his dogs were ready. Gunfire cracked through the desert like lightning ripping across the sky. The air filled with dust, the smell of gunpowder, and the echo of shouts as officers fought to hold their ground. Rex stayed at Blake's side, muscles coiled, eyes blazing with focus. Hunter moved like a shadow, darting in and out of cover, guiding officers with sharp, strategic growls. But in the chaos, no one noticed one attacker slipping through the smoke. He wasn't running toward the fight. He was circling around it, creeping toward the ridge, toward the hidden victims, toward Cole. Blake's radio crackled. "We've got movement on the backside." But it was too late. The attacker was already climbing. Cole lay unconscious on a stretcher, guarded by one medic who had stayed behind. The medic barely had time to turn before the gunman rushed forward, raising his weapon, ready to silence the only witness who could expose the entire cartel operation. Rex's head snapped up. He didn't hear the gunman, he felt him. With a guttural snarl, Rex launched himself off the ridge, sprinting faster than Blake had ever seen. Hunter heard the urgency in Rex's bark and tore away from the shack, racing to join him. The medic shouted, stumbling backward. The attacker aimed at Cole's chest. "No!" Blake yelled from below. The trigger began to squeeze. Rex hit the gunman like a missile. The impact knocked the weapon from the attacker's hands. The gun skidded across the sand. The man tumbled backward, slamming into a rock, scrambling desperately to regain balance. But Rex wasn't finished. He planted himself between Cole and the attacker, growling so deep it shook the ground. His teeth flashed, white and lethal. Hunter sprinted up the slope, joining Rex, forming a wall of muscle and fury in front of their fallen partner. The attacker reached for a knife. Hunter lunged first, knocking the blade away with a powerful strike of his paw. Rex followed, pinning the man to the ground with a force that left the gunman gasping. The medic stared in disbelief, breath trembling. Good Lord, they knew. They knew he was coming. Blake scrambled up the ridge, heart pounding, weapon raised. When he reached the top, the sight froze him. Rex stood over the subdued attacker, chest rising and falling in fierce, protective breaths. Hunter circled the man, barking sharply every few seconds, warning him not to move. Blake lowered his gun slowly. "You boys, you saved him again," he whispered. The medic nodded shakily. If they hadn't reacted, Cole would be dead. For a moment, the battle around them faded. The wind stilled. The world quieted. Because the truth was undeniable. Cole Harrison survived twice that day, and both times it was because of his dogs. The firefight slowly died as the remaining attackers realized they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and overwhelmed. One by one, weapons clattered against the rocks as cartel soldiers dropped to their knees, hands raised in surrender. Officers moved swiftly through the fading dust clouds, shouting commands, securing handcuffs, dragging unconscious gunmen into a controlled perimeter. Rex and Hunter stayed alert, pacing with sharp, focused energy, ready to react if anyone moved the wrong way. Their chests rose and fell heavily, but their eyes stayed locked on the captured men. Blake approached the attacker Rex had pinned. Two officers lifted the man to his feet. Blood trickled from his nose, his breathing ragged, but there was a strange calmness in his eyes, like he still held an advantage no one else could see. Blake stepped forward. "Start talking. Why Cole? Why all of this?" The man laughed softly, dry blood cracking at the corners of his mouth. "You officers always asking questions you don't want the answers to," Hunter growled, stepping closer until Blake motioned him back. Blake's jaw tightened. "You targeted a deputy. You blew up a vehicle. You tried to kill two officers. Why?" The man tilted his head, almost amused. "Because he found something he shouldn't have." Blake exchanged a tense glance with the sergeant. "What did he find?" "A route," the attacker whispered, leaning forward slightly, voice lowering to a chilling softness. "A perfect one. A route nobody was supposed to know about. A line through this desert that lets us move anything, guns, money, people, without anyone noticing." Blake felt his stomach twist. And Cole discovered it. Not just that. The attacker smiled coldly. He figured out we had people helping on the inside. Silence hit the officers like a physical blow. Inside? A traitor? Blake stepped closer. "Who?" The attacker smirked. "If I tell you, I'm dead. If I stay silent, maybe I live another day." The sergeant grabbed him by the vest, pulling him upright. "You're already done. Start talking." The attacker's smirk faded. His gaze drifted toward the shack, the wall of photos, the surveillance, the maps. "He wasn't supposed to survive," the attacker muttered. "We planned everything. The explosion, the setup, the ambush. And after we finished him, we were coming for anyone he told." Blake felt a chill run down his spine. "Meaning all of us." The man nodded slowly. But then he whispered one final thing. "And we're not the only team out here." The officers froze. The sergeant stiffened. Rex and Hunter raised their heads at the exact same moment, ears locking on a distant sound. The threat wasn't over. The hospital room was dim, lit only by a soft glow spilling through half-closed blinds. Machines hummed steadily, monitoring the fragile life resting on the bed. Cole Harrison lay still, wrapped in bandages, breathing through slow, uneven rises of his chest. The chaos of the desert felt a lifetime away. Blake stood near the window, arms crossed tightly, replaying the day over and over. The paramedics had said Cole's survival was a miracle. Blake knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was Rex. It was Hunter. It was two dogs who refused to give up on their partner. The door pushed open quietly. Rex entered first, walking slowly, ears lowered, tail still. Hunter followed, moving with the same gentle caution. The nurse smiled softly. "They've been waiting all night. I think it's time." Blake exhaled shakily. "Go on, boys. He's right there." Rex approached the bed, placing his paws lightly on the mattress. Hunter sat beside him, leaning in close. For a long moment, the room held nothing but silence and their steady breathing. Then Cole's fingers twitched. Blake stepped forward. "Cole, you with us." Cole's eyelids fluttered once, twice, then slowly lifted. His vision blurred at first, settling into shapes, then faces. But the first thing he truly focused on was Rex. A cracked, weak smile formed. "Hey, buddy." Rex whined softly, lowering his head onto Cole's arm. Hunter's tail tapped the floor once, a small, hopeful thump. Cole swallowed, eyes watering. "I thought I wasn't gonna make it." Blake moved closer, his voice thick with relief. "You almost didn't. But these two, they never stopped. They found you, protected you, saved you twice." Cole blinked hard, fighting tears. He lifted his trembling hand to rest on Rex's head. You're heroes." Blake nodded. "The docs said if they hadn't reacted when they did, you wouldn't be here." Cole let out a shaky exhale. "I owe them everything." The nurse entered with a note in her hand. "This came from the informant, the one we rescued. He insisted I give it to you." Cole opened it slowly. 5 simple words stretched across the page. "Your dogs saved us all." Blake looked at the 2 K9s, calm now, settled, watching over their officer like guardians carved from stone. Cole squeezed Rex's fur gently. "I'm alive because of you." Outside the window, morning sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the room with warm light, soft, golden, hopeful. It felt like a new beginning, because no matter how dark the desert had been, 2 loyal dogs had refused to let their partner fade into it. This story reminds us that true heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs, guided by loyalty, instinct, and unconditional courage. Officer Cruz survived because his K9 partners refused to give up, proving that dedication and teamwork can save lives even in the toughest situations. It also teaches us that every second matters in an emergency, and staying alert can prevent tragedy. Most importantly, it shows that compassion and responsibility toward others, human or animal, create a world where no one is left behind. When we protect those who protect us, we build a stronger, safer community for everyone.